Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
I'd like to introduce our opening keynote for Shadow Summit 2021 Day 2. This is going to be Blockchain, the Future of Project Delivery, led by Robert Salvador of DigiBuild. This session is going to cover innovation in construction and why blockchain is the right solution to solve construction project pain points. So I'd like to introduce our panel speakers for this keynote, starting with Andrew Lindsey. He is the co-founder and CEO of FlexNode and Director of Applied Research and Development at AlphaCorp. We have Joshua Rogove, President of CR Solutions, Adam Richards, Partner at Berger Singerman, Jerry Horani, the Chief Technology Officer of VCC Construction, and finally, Robert Salvador, CEO and co-founder of DigiBuild. So with that, Rob, I will turn it over to you, and you guys can share your cameras, and we are looking forward to this opening keynote. Thanks so much, everyone. And then I will just give one more reminder. Please, attendees, add your questions to the chat on the right-hand side of the screen and throughout the day. We'd love to hear more of your questions and engage with the panelists. That's why that's there. So if you've got any thoughts or questions, feel free to add those into the chat. Rob, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Ian. And thank you to everyone who just jumped into the room. And thank you as well to our speakers. Thrilled to be here today to talk about blockchain in construction. So as many of you may have seen, in the media nowadays, cryptocurrency and blockchain in general seems to be on the tip of everyone's tongue. And while blockchain gives a lot of opportunities that most people don't really know about outside of just cryptocurrency and the things you might see on, crypto trading and Bitcoin and things like that, the underlying protocol, the underlying technology behind the blockchain allows for some very unique opportunities in construction where you have a bunch of companies who don't really trust one another, but we have to do business together on our projects. And so blockchain allows this opportunity to really clean up a lot of the paperwork and the labor-intensive processes that we currently have to do in order to do business, in order to meet risk management requirements on certain construction projects. So throughout the panel today, we'll talk a little bit about the potential of blockchain. We'll talk more about what the technology itself does, and we'll talk about how we might be able to apply this to the AEC industry as a whole in order to improve processes and make our lives easier. So with that, I'm going to go through the panel members and have them introduce themselves. We have some great professionals who do some big things in the construction industry, and they were kind enough to jump on this panel with us today. So with that, I will go in order, start with Andrew, then go to Josh, and have you guys introduce yourselves, your positions, and then maybe how you first heard about blockchain, and then we can go from there. So go ahead, Andrew. I'll kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rob. My name is Andrew Lindsey. As was noted before, I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called FlexNode, which is designing, building, operating, financing, and maintaining micro data centers worldwide that are hyper efficient and hyper modular. In addition, as was also noted, I serve in a capacity as Director of Applied Research and Development for a company called Alpha Corporation, which is a multidisciplinary construction consulting firm headquartered out of the broader DC area that focuses on everything from buildings to heavy infrastructure to transportation and finally energy and utilities. In addition to those capacities, I also serve on the steering committee for the US under the Construction Blockchain Consortium out of the University College London, which really oversees a lot of international standards and best practices for blockchain technology, primarily focused in the European market. And I've been with them roughly about now 3 years. So as far as my first contacts with blockchain, I've been developing and growing companies for the last 15 years. My co-founder in my second company actually left my company when we started to scale it out in a good way. It was a great thing. But he ultimately ended up joining BTC Media, which owns groups like Bitcoin Magazine and the like. He's now chief product officer over there. And that was, I guess 5-6 years ago now, when he was essentially like, you need to get into this space, not just from the crypto perspective, but looking at blockchain from a utility perspective and how we can effectively exchange information where there's a growing level of distrust inter and intra industry, especially between different stakeholders in the value chain. But with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. Very much appreciate it. And now, how about Josh?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Rogove. I'm a president of CR Solutions. CR Solutions, we're a third-party wrap-up administration firm. For those not familiar with the term wrap-up, it's a casualty insurance product focused in the construction industry, where essentially an owner or a general contractor can procure insurance for all contractors while working on site. Our role in that process is to make sure that the insurance carrier is aware of all contractors before they access the site, who they are, make sure they have proper coverage under the policy. We're responsible for collecting payroll from all the subcontractors, collecting certificates of insurance. So as you could understand, with all these touch points with all these contractors and some of them not trusting each other, blockchain, we feel, is a great solution to kind of help us through our typical roles. My initial dealings with blockchain was really around cryptocurrency. But now understanding more about the underlying technology, we're excited about embracing that and really helping innovate our space in the insurance, casualty insurance space. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, perfect, Josh. Thanks for that. And let's go to Jerry next. Jerry, you mind giving a little bit of background and how you first came across blockchain?
Sure. Thank you, Rob, and good morning, everybody. Always nice to be here with the team and actually get to talk about this very interesting subject. My name is Jerry Harani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for VCC Construction and all the group. Just for those who don't know VCC, we're mainly the number one really retail and commercial construction general contracting company in the U.S. We have been in business for more than 35 years, and just like any general contractors, been dealing with the deficiency of the construction documents workflow since day one. And me and Rob's story is a bit interesting because we both kind of shared that same vision before we met. I've studied in the blockchain use cases for construction workflows for a year or so before I met Rob. And when we met, I was like, oh, they're building exactly what we're thinking we need. So it was a very interesting meeting and vision that got aligned. As everybody knows, trust is, in my opinion, one of, if not the most brought up issue in construction workflows ever. And when you go through blockchain and just go through a simple checklist of whether what you're trying to solve with blockchain is a candidate of blockchain or not, when you go through the trust, you've got too many different parties and entities dealing with each other, not trusting each other, but yet have to collaborate with each other and have to kind of exchange documents and payments and waivers of lien and closeouts and supply chain issues. It's a mess. And even though there are so many centralized database systems that, like we've developed our own, and there are others that use Procore and Viewpoint and so many different solutions on the market, there is one that everybody could feel that I could trust this because it's not the GCs and it's not the owners and it's not to anybody's bias or advantage. It's everybody's network. And that's been always a vision that we've had here at VCC. And when I met Rob, we talked the same story. And Rob was like, well, this is what we're trying to solve. I said, well, this is exactly what the problem is. So we're very excited about what the DigiBuild team is building. I firmly believe that the trust factor and the idea that this network is shared and owned by everybody is being built with a way that you can not only trust, but you can verify. So you can trusting is one thing, right? We all trust electronic signatures and we all trust all these things, but verifying that the data that led to that document is been transacted in a ledger on a blockchain that nobody could tamper is a huge thing. It really is. And when you put that in perspective, and I was talking to someone a couple of days ago, one of the other challenges in construction is the market share. How do you go? People don't move systems very often. They don't move systems really hardly any, and it's a pain. But you know what? When the trust becomes an issue, you would see them just really jump ship of those systems quickly. So that all makes me feel very strong about what the DigiBuild is building, the team, the core team, the focus on the blockchain, but also having a collaborative system is also just all kind of put the icing on the cake, if you would. So very excited. Can't wait to see more and to kind of onboard more of the processes on the system. We're using a couple of modules right now, but we're excited to use more. Always hungry for new tech. So talking to our subs, they're also excited. So really, I see a big future for this. So thank you, Rob, and thanks for everybody. And I'll entertain questions when they come up.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Jerry. And you bring up some great points just around collaboration and certain processes like procurement and whatnot that we will get into and talk more specifically about how blockchain might be able to clean up or otherwise improve those workflows. So we'll definitely get to that. And now, last but certainly not least, Adam, if you don't mind, we'll turn it over to you to give a little bit on your background and how you got here and how you discovered blockchain. So go ahead, Adam.
Sure, Robert. Thank you so much. Good morning, Rob, team. It's also fantastic to be here at this year's Shadow Ventures Summit. I'm a board-certified construction lawyer in Florida. I help lead up the Berger Singerman's construction practice throughout the state and also nationally with respect to certain matters. And the practice essentially entails dealing with projects from the very early stages all the way through post-completion. So services include bidding, contract negotiations, certain issues on the development side, pre-construction, any type of problem that can arise during a project, catastrophic accidents, God forbid, collapses, payment issues, delays, work issues, you name it. And then, of course, we wrap it up by providing dispute resolution services after completion. So that experience has certainly exposed me to some of the more common pain points that the industry still suffers from. And I think that is what ultimately led me to Robert and DigiBuild and the team this morning, due to our mutual interest in, I think, the tech world and construction and trying to really evolve our industry and, all the different areas where blockchain may be able to alleviate some of those pain points. So that's essentially how we got here. It's probably already a year, Rob, which is insane to think that we've been dealing with each other. And happy to be a part of this, answer any questions, and I'll pass it right back to you.
Yeah, awesome, Adam. Thank you as well for joining, and great to have a legal perspective here. And as everyone can see, we tried to bring in multiple different stakeholder perspectives, GCs, CMs, insurance companies, the legal side of things, kind of to give some perspective on what blockchain might be able to do here. So I'll just give a quick introduction on my background as well. So I'm Rob Salvador, co-founder and CEO of DigiBuild. We make construction management software that's powered by blockchain. We have been really fortunate to, really come out strong this year. We are backed by Y Combinator, the top startup accelerator in the world. We just finished as part of their summer 21 batch. also backed by Tim Draper, the co-founders of PlanGrid, Bluefield Capital, and quite a few other major partners who have come along with us in this journey to revolutionize construction using blockchain. Prior to that, I grew up in construction. So I've been a general contractor, I've been a subcontractor, I've worked for owner developers. So I've really been able to see construction pain points from multiple different stakeholder positions as well. And it was really that experience that kind of drove me to looking at blockchain. I kind of, like Josh, have been, like Josh and some of the other panel members, have been into cryptocurrency for quite a while. And a couple of years back, I was really kind of studying the underlying use cases of blockchain and those protocols and what they might be able to do in business in general. And kind of just had this moment where I realized that construction could really be disrupted and improved using blockchain. As some of the other panel members have mentioned, in construction, you've got all these different companies, these different stakeholders who all have their own agendas, they all have their own incentives, and all of those stakeholders still have to do business with one another. So they spend a lot of time and resources trying to build trust manually. We all know risk management and risk management principles. And so as organizations, we add a lot of cost and a lot of risk to our processes because we don't trust the other companies that we work with. So in order to build trust with those companies, we end up having to do a lot of manual processing. And so at scale in construction, there's some estimates that say that we're losing up to $170 billion per year due to construction management inefficiencies. So, there's a lot of these workflows that can be cleaned up in a way that can still, take a lot of the burden off of our project managers, off of our project accountants. And previously, you haven't been able to do this because you've never been able to introduce trust digitally. So there's a quote that we at DigiBuild always like to talk about. It's from Ben Horowitz from the venture capital firm A16Z, one of the most famous and prestigious venture capital firms in the world. And Ben Horowitz in this quote basically says that blockchain is the next evolution of technology. Throughout the years, you've seen kind of these inflection points where new pieces of technology that are market changing have come out. So that started with the mainframe computer, and then that moved to the internet itself. And then that moved to the cell phone. And then that moved to artificial intelligence. And now what Ben Horowitz says is the next evolution of the next major technological innovation like that is blockchain. And the reason it's so important is because we've never been able to introduce trust digitally in a digital medium. It's never been possible before. So we've never been able in business to trust mathematics and game theory as opposed to trusting human intervention or third-party intervention. So as we'll talk about here, blockchain and the trust that it brings in construction allows us to do a lot of things that just haven't been done before. And I think three main drivers we talk about, and then we'll pass back to the other panel members here to talk about some of their pain points. But the three main drivers and benefits that you see for the end user using blockchain are around automation, around audit capabilities, and around data insights. So there's some really exciting things that you can do with blockchain. So happy to get into that here in a moment. So now I'm going to pass it back around the panel just to talk about pain points. So there's a lot of issues in construction right now, and specifically a lot of those pain points come directly from the lack of trust between these companies. So going back to Andrew to start, just want to talk about pain points that each of our companies as different stakeholders are currently seeing in the industry. That can be high level, around procurement, around payments, or it can be more, micro processes. Hey, we're currently having issues with, the lender and visibility into these projects or something like that. So Andrew, that might give you a couple ideas. I know that you've talked about the lenders and visibility before. So let's talk about your pain points and things that Alpha Corp is seeing right now, Andrew.
Yeah, so I guess we can focus on some of the pain points vertically and horizontally. And I think you started to touch on that, Rob. And so, one of the things that came to my attention when I started in the built environment was data integrity through the life cycle of the project. And so, I think a lot of people who are outside of the industry think that when you have sort of this pre-design and then a design process, then procurement and then build and handover and operation, all of that information is packaged in this nice sort of bowed bundle that you get at the end, and all of that information conveys exactly what's in a project. And I think the challenge that we've run into, and I think we've briefly touched on this already, is that the integrity of that information actually, from a research perspective, about 70% of the integrity of information from the start of a project to the end is lost as the industry stands today. And so what does that mean? What that means is that you have a fundamental disconnect between what the project scope was and what the architects designed for, oftentimes all the way through what the actual operator is dealing with on the ground, right? And so all the different changes that have been made between things like design engineering and making sure that it's cost efficient on the ground, as well as where things have actually been placed by various trades on the ground, can result in sort of a mishmash of information that loses a lot of its integrity. And so where I believe blockchain can be very important here is actually how that information is passed between parties in such a way that doesn't necessarily increase the liability on each one of those parties by passing it over. I think that's a huge concern in the industry as to, if I give up my control of this information, how is that information going to be manipulated in a way that is out of my control that may be held against me in the future? And so with blockchain, giving sort of a sandbox, if you will, where actually you can trace where all those sort of drag marks are, really creates a level of trust that is almost that trust but verify framework. Specifically speaking on the financing side of things, I think that's really important to take into account, as Rob noted as well. So an example that we can commonly see is projects that have a number of delays that are impending. And the delays around those projects actually having a very significant financial impact around both sort of the current state of that project as well as its likelihood of finishing. And so one of the things that ultimately becomes a challenge is the groups that often underwrite the project cost oftentimes have no insight into what's actually happening on the ground. So when that's ultimately the case, then when the project goes belly up, if it does, that financier is hit with a wave that they never saw coming. And so one of the things that blockchain can do in a safe and secure way is allow for various stakeholders in a party to understand sort of the current state of things without external interference on sort of what that picture looks like. I don't know if that helps articulate that, Rob.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and also plays well into kind of what we'll talk about with Josh on the insurance side of things, the lack of visibility. So kind of what Andrew was just saying, you've got these lenders who don't have direct visibility into the project, but they need to. They're obviously, one of the most important sources or most important stakeholders on the job. But currently, a lot of the workflows, a lot of the critical information that's flowing into the project might come from the general contractor and their subcontractors in, say, Procore or some sort of construction management software. So it's great, we have the data here, but the lender who's over here doesn't have visibility into that. So as Andrew is kind of saying, now more time and effort and risk is added to the process for both the general contractor and the lender because there's a gap in that information. So now if the lender wants that info, the lender has to take their time and effort and internal resources and either call or email or somehow get in touch with the project and say, hey, I need visibility into what's going on there. So Andrew brings up a great point, especially with COVID and the disruptions that happened in 2020, where lenders are sitting there saying, hey, I might have a project that's about to blow up and I don't even know it. So that's where blockchain and that visibility that it adds to, outside parties, they can bring them into this trusted data environment, could be very helpful for those stakeholders. So now on the insurance side, passing it over to Josh, we see how these same problems are kind of prevalent though. So Josh, if maybe you want to talk about like the same problems around lack of visibility that a lender might have working with Andrew Lindsey and Alpha Corp, you have, or subcontractors or the insurance company might have, that lack of visibility. So maybe talk about it from your perspective and how you might see those same problems just in a different stakeholder role.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Rob. And so at our core at CR Solutions, we're responsible to essentially collect, sort, and report data and information that's coming to us through the general contractor. They're typically notifying us of any notice of award to any subcontractor. And then we're reaching out to those subcontractors, gathering information from them, passing that information along to the insurance carrier. We have to also make sure that we're enrolling all subs of every tier. So on a typical project, you could have up to 100 contractors that are needed to be enrolled in the program. And to Rob's point, the insurance carriers, the way that they underwrite these deals is because there's no prior experience. So typically the way insurance is underwritten is you look back at historical loss experience for a particular trade or for a particular contractor, and you'd look at the past 5 years, and then the underwriters would take that into account, look at manual rates, and then develop what future premiums are. Whereas under these wrap-up programs, the way that they're underwritten is really looking at similar like-in-kind jobs in similar jurisdictions, creating a model and building off of that. So to the insurance carrier, the credibility of the data is key, because if they start looking at inaccurate data, then future underwriting models don't work properly. So we see opportunities with the procurement process. So whether it's a connection with a Procore or CMIC, or even if DigiBuild builds out a project management software solution, avoiding the duplicate entry that's needed to be done by the general contractor, by the subcontractor, by us, by the insurance carrier. If all that information can flow directly through, there's higher credibility, higher accuracy, and it's fed through more timely. So there's opportunities there. We also are responsible on these programs because although the sponsor is providing insurance coverage, loss experience that affect all these subcontractors still get reported to their respective states, and they have experience modification factors that are affected based on their experience. So even though someone is procuring insurance for them, all the payroll that they incur on a particular project and all the losses that they incur on a particular project need to be reported to the state. So we also view opportunities where could we possibly link up with, and the process right now is that on a monthly basis, we're reaching out to each subcontractor that's enrolled in the program. The 10th of each month, they're providing payroll to us for the prior 30 days. So again, it's lagging. It's not instantaneous. It's also being done by an individual. There's no direct feed. So we also view opportunities where if we can use DigiBuild to connect to Paychex, ADP, payroll systems, maybe we can access the payroll information on a permission basis in real time, provide that information to the insurance carrier. And then there are other benefits that come to that because the insurance carriers are in the business of taking risk on actual losses. They're not in the business of taking financial risk. So they tend to take a pretty conservative stance or position on premium payments, collateral payments. But we feel that, and we've spoken to a few insurance carriers, Chubb in particular, if we're able to give them higher credibility in the data and more accurately, then there might lend itself to better premium payment terms. And on these projects, depending on what state you're in, insurance costs can be up to 10% of the construction value. So it's significant dollars. And if any way we could help with getting credible information to the insurance carrier timely, it might ultimately help out the general contractor or the owner. So thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Rob, if I can, I'd like to provide an example of where I think financing and insurance really overlap in the built environment, especially in a construction issue that came to my attention not more than about 6 months ago. So a project that, and one of the things that Alpha does is claims and dispute resolution, similarly to what Adam was saying, but I think from a non-legal perspective. And so, one of the things that was brought to our attention was a project where the windows had actually been installed backwards. And so what was interesting about that was it was a major mixed-use development, massive building, and the windows were installed backwards. And so what ultimately happened was those windows were in for roughly about 7 years before they realized a number of things. One, that the windows were in backwards in the first place, but two, the weatherproofing was no longer the same effectiveness as it was if they had it, the right way. So the inside of the building actually developed up mildew and mold, which then required the total renovation and essentially rip job, which meant tens of millions of dollars that needed to be spent, if not more, in order to just fix this window. It was essentially issues derived from this window issue. So where it becomes really interesting from a blockchain perspective is where the issue went wrong with the windows, right? So you can look at it from the perspective of the issue happening at the manufacturing level. You can evaluate it if it was at the labeling stage, right? Which way are the labels facing, and does that actually check out? The scope work, and on the management side for being able to evaluate it if everything was done right and laid out with instructions correctly, from the trades perspective, so on and so forth. And what's interesting is every single one of those parties, when you see a tens of millions of dollar fine or essentially bill coming your way, that's something that everybody's going to start pointing at each other. It doesn't matter, what level of integrity your firm has. Everybody's going to be like, there must have been something wrong. It couldn't have been us, right? And so when you have this sort of process where there's incremental checkoffs of who has what information, what is the state of that information, and what did they do to it while they had it, it's a game changer in the industry. And that's just one single example where you have tens of millions of dollars that can be saved or directed efficiently, that can, be understood as a result of blockchain. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So just letting you know, Jerry, I'll pass to you next. But so Andrew, that's a great point, because in that scenario, another thing that you have is multiple versions of the truth, right? So to your point, whoever was the window installer is going to have their documents and their version of truth, and they're going to stick to that. Hey, this is why I'm not on the hook for this back charge, or whatever it is. Then you're going to have the GC that says this is why we're not at fault. Manufacturer is going to say this is why we're not at fault. Whoever, maybe your main job site supplier, or again, maybe that's your sub, whatever. Not my fault, not the architect's fault. So then whatever actually happened becomes very important, to Andrew's point. So that's why having a version of truth that is shared and owned by all of the parties on the project is a very big deal. And so that's what blockchain does. It gives you a mathematical or a verifiable version of the truth. So in that scenario, there's no way that you could point to any other thing that's happening. You have this one single version of truth that all of the parties on the construction project can utilize. So just one more note on that. If you look around the entire industry right now, whether it's a general contractor or whether it's a software company like a Procore, what does every company say in their marketing? Built with trust. You can trust us. Building trust. The single source of truth on your project. The one version of truth on your project, right? Everyone in the industry is trying to get to that. Blockchain is the first technology that's made for that. So that's why it's a perfect example that Andrew brought up. So now let's talk really quick about the general contractor perspective from Jerry. So Jerry, can you talk a little bit about your current pain points, maybe just around like big issues that trust directly adds a bunch of cost and additional processes and complexity to your organization? So
yeah, thank you.
Procurement, right? Like how you have multiple people just in your office, just handling procurement. So maybe you could talk a little bit about those pain points, and then how you feel blockchain might be able to fix that or improve that. And then I can jump on that as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Andrew and team. Great points. Obviously, if you're on a call observing this theme and what we're talking about, you've got challenges in all aspects of the project life cycle. And to Andrew's point, it stayed 7 years after. So we're not done. The challenge GCs have, we're not done with the project when we're done with the project. We're done 10 years after if we're lucky. So we still have to imagine, we still have to keep with records. We still have to be on our toes. Every project we finish, we celebrate, but we really, 10 years down the road, there is, like Andrew said, that question on Windows, who you think without knowing who the real issue is, who you think dealt with it? The GC. Imagine the cost that you incur just by keeping records and making sure that people trust your records. That's another issue. So if you take that risk and you take the insurance risk and you take the substance supplier, the GC in the middle is making sure all of this picture and all of the project lifecycle gets through smoothly and afterwards. So the challenges we have are during this process. You've got challenges along the way: payments, procurement, supply chain, closeouts, warranties, waivers of lien, ensuring that every supplier that touches the job gets paid, and actually get you a document that he's actually paid. And actually, that waiver of lien, I consider it the most important document on a project. And making sure those payments are verified and checked, and make sure those, the work is done, and then make sure you get your documents for closeouts to hand over to the owner. So when there is an issue, they trust that you've given them all the documents and the proper documents. So all of that is a big challenge. Obviously, like every GC, we don't think we get paid enough to manage all that. but the key is what blockchain will do, and what I'm excited about, what you're building, Rob, is we're starting to put this together and stitch this workflow, the project lifecycle, and take every workflow to where it expedites that process. 1, 2, after we're done, Andrew and Josh and Adam and everybody could go back to a network that they can trust. All of the documents is there. Nobody tampered with them. And you could go 5 years from now and get them. You could trust they've been checked. There's no, I forgot to give you this document, and I'm going to take this out, and you didn't give me that, and you gave me that. That's all of them. By the way, if you look at a lawsuit in construction, a discovery process, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars are wasted on attorney fees of discovery. I mean, sometimes the only people who make money on lawsuits are attorneys. So when you go back, I know Adam is laughing over there, and it's but getting the documents and get your hands on the right discovery that you can trust from the get-go saves so much of discovery. So just imagine that. And sometimes everybody knowing that these records are trusted and verifiable can also eliminate an issue, because nobody could question and all of that. Everything is laid out, and here's the single really version of the truth. Now you go back to the actual construction workflow. As you're building, you're paying people and making sure you're getting these documents that with blockchain we don't have to notarize, obviously, because everybody's going to trust it's being recorded on a blockchain. That's a huge thing. And getting them in a place where almost, I call it an escrow, where it's sanitized, nobody will question it, adds all of the above to the trust of the network. So in my opinion, yes, Rob, to your point, you'll probably see a lot of solutions that will say, single point of truth and centralized database and all of that. And I trust that and I respect that, but you got to have a technology that's verifiable and nobody could question. And that's what really excites me about DigiBuild is the platform that's built on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jerry. And I'll talk here in a second just kind of how that trust then appears to users or end users in construction and what we can do there. But first, I just want to get some kind of the legal perspective from Adam. So Jerry brought up some good points around discovery, around, how a lot of times, as you know, Adam, these projects, a large project in construction will create upwards of 750,000 documents. And so now you have all those documents with multiple versions of truth. So Adam, if you talk maybe just a little bit about, Jerry's point around discovery costs, around how both sides don't trust one another's paperwork, around how, maybe in your experience, how, at least in my experience in disputes, usually both sides don't even know what they have, right? Like one side says this, the other side says that. But if they actually understood what they had paperwork wise, they might be like, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't be getting into a dispute. So Adam, I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on, all of that, and then how blockchain and a single source of truth might be able to alleviate some of that pain in legal discovery and legal disputes.
Absolutely. And Jerry raised a wonderful point, and I know we've talked about this at length, Rob. I actually see the blockchain technology going one step further, right? And this is, I think, one of the best points that we've made internally, and that's, yes, having a centralized database, so to say, as your project record can certainly save the time, the expense associated with discovery in these lawsuits, because at the end of the day, and you said 750K, that's low in my experience. You have the owner's project file as opposed to the GC's project file, as opposed to some of the larger subcontractors' project files. If you're collecting those records and files and trying to make sense of it, you're dealing with oftentimes millions and millions of pages, records. And guess what? The thing that always strikes me with every matter that I see, despite the millions of pages of records that each respective player is maintaining, you're in a lawsuit. You have a dispute, right? You're arguing over delays, over work product, over payments, whatever it may be. Even though each of you already has millions of pages of your respective project record, and you'll point the finger at certain correspondence, certain notices and letters will be completely absent from the project file, despite the millions of pages being in there. And what I see blockchain allowing for or facilitating is it's another step towards not having to get to that point, right? Not having to deal with the lawsuit, not having to deal with the discovery, even though you'd be dealing with it in a more efficient fashion. But you now have more of a foundation to work from. And I think that's so important, whether it's in the middle of a project when a dispute arises, or after a project when you're first noticing a problem or a claim hits your desk, having a better foundation to work from that encourages collaboration and transparency, I think is just another big step in terms of evolving the dispute resolution process that construction often finds itself having to experience. And one of the most common pain points that I see on that exact issue, Rob, is being able to litigate cases and also handle the transactional work from the commencement of a project, really allows you to see a holistic view of the construction life cycle, right? From the very, very beginning, when everyone's kumbaya, to the very, very end, where millions of dollars of legal fees are being spent. And litigation often involves a single set of circumstances. I call it the domino effect, where you have a design that's not complete. The players don't discuss that. You have change orders getting introduced into a project. Eventually, you have disputes over those change orders. And then you have funding and payment problems that then increase and then start affecting downstream, which then causes certain efficiency problems, additional delays to the project, and so forth. And I've now seen in the current life cycle where we are, it's a lot of transactions are happening, a lot of projects are getting started, and there's also a lot of demand and a lot of rush to make that happen. So I've seen firsthand design not being complete, and yet the project participants are acting as if they have a complete design, maybe even negotiating a GMP, establishing a budget, and yet the most very obvious issue of having to deal with change orders down the road is never discussed. And I see blockchain and the technology and the AI automation that can also coincide and bolster the blockchain record, just really helping to facilitate collaboration and transparency, and to finally ask those difficult questions and force the respective sides to look at a project and look at the blockchain record and discuss these issues and plan for these issues appropriately. And, I think so many problems that our industry faces is just not wanting to deal with the tough things as early on as possible and to resolve them. Instead, they fester, they exponentially worsen, and it's because of the inherent adversarial nature that the industry has allowed to fester for decades, if not centuries. I can talk about this for years, but I will stop myself and I will pass it back to you, Rob.
Yeah, it's great perspective, Adam. And, definitely, I know we could go down the rabbit hole there, like we've done in the past, but really appreciate that, legal perspective, and appreciate all of the other panel members' perspectives. So in the last 10 minutes here, what I'd like to do is just talk end user benefits, right? So we're talking blockchain, we're talking how introducing trust into your projects digitally could be extremely beneficial, right? But what does that look like to your end users, to your PMs who are running jobs, to your project accountants who are dealing with the applications for payment and the lien waiver, all that? So that's what I'd like to spend the last few minutes doing here. So I just want to take a minute to explain blockchain from a bit of a technical perspective. And then from there, I will pass it around to the panel to talk, how we might do some of these things in practice. So for those of you who don't know, before blockchain, the internet was all centralized databases. So you have your computer that all of your information resides in, or maybe it's your company's, database, or maybe it's your individual computer. And when you input data into that, it goes into what is called a data silo. So your information is your information. No one else can see inside your computer. No one else can interact with the data inside your computer or your database. It's yours. You have complete control over that. And so when you send an email or when you send any document over the internet, you're sending a copy from your database to someone else's. So if I send Josh an email right now, it goes from my database to his or CR Solutions database, right? And once the data I've sent, maybe an email, hits his database, I lose control over that. So I might send him an email that says, CR Solutions is the best company in the world. And, right? But there's nothing that stops him from manipulating that data and saying, CR Solutions is the best company in the world, and I'm going to give you $1 million, Josh. Even though I didn't say that in my email, there's nothing that stops him from manipulating the data in his database and making it say that, right? So there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of visibility when information goes into a database. There's no transparency on the other side. You can't see if that data has been manipulated, changed, passed along to someone else, downloaded. So there is something called informational uncertainty. And that's a quote that Andrew has made before that says, informational uncertainty adds cost and risk to construction. With blockchain, as opposed to a centralized database that is completely closed off, think of blockchain as almost like a group text message. So in the panel right now, between all of us, pretend that email that I sent to Josh, all of the other parties in this group, there is a little invisible string tied to that email I just sent to Josh. So if Josh tries to change that email to add to my data, all the other parties here are going to know about it. They might not see the data, it's permissioned, but they're going to know, hey, the blockchain has told us that Rob sent Josh an email, but Josh then changed something in that email, right? So it adds a certainty to your data. So let's take a construction workflow and talk about what informational uncertainty does to us. So let's talk about a lien waiver, a waiver of lien, right? Everyone knows them. In order to get paid on a project, I have to sign a piece of paper that literally is just a text block. And then you have to put in the right amount, payment amount, the right date, and then you have to sign it. All that document does is build trust between my company and your company because we don't trust one another. Think about this. Why can't you just pay me? Let's say there's a check owed to me for $100,000. Why can't you just give me that check? And I say, hey, I promise you, you have my word. I won't file a lien now that you're giving me this money. You have my word, Scout's honor. Well, it's because we don't trust one another, right? And risk management dictates that you have to put paperwork in place in order to be protected. So what happens? I have to sign a lien waiver, a checkbox that says, basically, I won't sue you, I promise. That's what it says on the document. So in doing that, it adds manual processing and cost to me. Let's say I'm a subcontractor. I have to fill out the lien waiver. It adds time and cost for Jerry as the general contractor because he has to check that lien waiver for compliance, and then they have to fill out their own lien waiver and turn that into the owner, right? So all of that adds multiple touch points of cost and risk, okay? And that is trust. That's manual trust building because we don't trust one another. So when you introduce blockchain into this scenario where trust is already there, where there's no way I can manipulate a document or manipulate a piece of data, now we can have a platform or the DigiBuild platform do these workflows for you. So we can automatically create, execute, and approve lien waivers and all of the other payment documents that are needed. Your supplier affidavits, things like that. And the reason for that is because previously, just in this room, you have 5 parties who don't trust one another. So each of those 5 parties in different construction workflows, from payments to procurement to insurance, there's 5 different places of manual touch points, right? The insurance company has to put their documentation in place so that they're protected. Andrew Lindsey and Alpha Corp as the owner's rep has to put their documentation in place and check it to make sure they're protected. Jerry as the GC has to do the same thing, subcontractors, etc. So at scale in construction, there's over 150 different types of these workflows, and we do them tens of thousands of times per year. That goes back to the 170 billion that the industry is wasting due to construction management inefficiencies. When you have trust built in between these companies, you can provide 10 times more automation to save companies money, 10 times more audit capabilities, which reduces risk and saves money, and 10 times more data insights, which again reduces risk and helps us to make better decisions. So that's where blockchain can improve construction processes, boots on the ground. And we'll go through a couple more examples here in the last few minutes. So to each of the panelists, I'm just going to ask you to maybe think about some of the different workflows we've talked about or use cases we've talked about where blockchain might be able to clean things up or make things better. So Andrew, I'll start with you. Obviously, we're doing some things with claims ledger and claims and schedule compression. So maybe if you want to talk about that, or a few payments, whatever you prefer. Just want to hear about some maybe blockchain in construction use cases.
Absolutely. So one specific use case that's become really significantly of interest to me, and I've worked with now a number of engineering excellence firms worldwide on this use case, is really focusing on facility management. And really, what does it look like to leverage the information that you have available to you in the ongoing life cycle of the building post handover period? And what does that look like sort of within that almost warranty coverage period, as Jerry outlined? And then what does it look like thereafter, as well as when the building is potentially modernized, renovated, and then again handed over to another owner? One of the challenges that we've seen, and I was discussing this a little bit before, is that as a result of that informational uncertainty and really the lack of integrity that you get across the project lifecycle, by the time you actually have a handover process, and I want to be clear here, it wasn't too long ago that companies were still dropping off an entire truckload of binders that were ultimately put into the back corner of a boiler room, and nobody looked at them. And so, what you get as a result of that is a building manual that's probably out of date as soon as it's put in there, right? And so what becomes really of interest is when you then have, say, some form of critical failure on site with one of the systems in place, and how do you interact with that as far as the warranty information associated with it, actually filing the affidavit to the warranty provider, actually having a supplier be able to replace the right part, having the right tradesperson or contractor on site that actually has the certifications required to deliver and install that part, some process of a QA QC that lets you know that it was done appropriately without having to be directly on site managing yourself, and then being able to store all that updated information back into the O&M manual for that building, such that then the next time that potentially happens, they have the right information immediately. First off, what you see very often is you'll see an engineer that comes on site as a result of that critical failure, and they'll immediately start researching that device from the ground up, right? They'll start evaluating it based on, every other device of that type that they've seen. And now you're talking about 5 times more work than you would if they knew exactly what they're dealing with and exactly what the replacement needs to be. And so
30 seconds, Andrew, if you would, just so for timing.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much the long and short of it was, with that, what you're able to do is automate a lot of that process between all the different stakeholders. And there's really no finger wagging or pointing when going into the process. So,
yeah, thank you for that. Josh, turned over to you. And if we could, everybody, maybe 30, 45 seconds as we run out of time here.
Yeah.
Josh, I know we talked about, different data sources for you guys, something we've looked at, data integrity is a big thing within, especially insurance companies, right? So provenance of the data is something that's very important. And what that means, before I turn to you, Josh, is knowing where the data came from, right? Picture an invisible string from the blockchain to wherever the data came from, so it's accurate data. Right now, about half of the data companies look at is inaccurate, and that's a big deal. So, Josh, if you might talk about what that looks like for the insurance company.
Yeah, I mean, one of the projects, Rob, you know that we're working on together is adding just more color to the actual contractor. So, especially in this environment where we have now, where some of these major cities, the building is kind of slowed down a bit since post-COVID, and we're seeing a lot of growth in these quote unquote secondary cities. So allowing the insurance carrier to see that Rob Salvador is now opening up an office in Austin, Texas, and now allowing them to understand it and link and bring over his OSHA experience, his claims experience. So the underwriter actually has a better understanding of who's on site, which again helps mitigate risk and losses down the road. So I think overall, just us being able to seamlessly fit into the overall construction flow of business, but allowing DigiBuild to be the one that's piping that information to us, and then allowing us to pipe that information to the insurance carrier.
Yep, makes perfect sense. I think one of the things everyone watching can agree upon is we don't have enough insights or data on subcontractors and suppliers, right? One reference I always make is when you're choosing a subcontractor, it should be like looking at a fantasy football roster. You should have rankings, you should have stats. You should say, hey, this company is great at hitting the schedule. This company's a little bit less expensive, but they might miss their schedule. And so blockchain allows you to pool all that data and create insights like that for decision making. So Jerry, just to you really quickly here, maybe just talk about some of the results, maybe in payments or procurement, right, things that blockchain allows you to do.
Yeah, thank you all. Here is, in a nutshell, I would conclude with this. We, on the payment side, just a quick example, just what Rob described on the waiver process and paying and going back, all of that. I'm going to give you guys a quick fact. From the moment a subcontractor submits their payment request, so they get paid on average, normally in this, you're talking about 60 to 90 days on a good note till these guys get paid. Imagine the pain. And all of that time is wasted verifying. So there's nothing happening within that time. It's just verifying, did he pay the supplier? Did we get paid? Get the waiver, turn back to the owner checking us checking subs. All of that is a 90-day process at its best, 60 to 90 days. So just imagine, I'll leave you guys to just imagine, while this is happening, you've got an auditor that's called DigiBuild or that's running on a blockchain that we all trust that nobody can mess with, that's checking all of that. So when the owner goes to the payment goes to the ownership, it's already checked and verified. Just imagine the impact that could have on the industry, not just as a company, on the industry, just on the payment. We're testing it now on one project and actually using it on one project with a multifamily project where we and the owner are going through back and forth on pay apps using DigiBuild, and just we're already seeing the comfort level that it's creating in the environment from between us and the owners, running on a platform that we both know what things are changing and how the numbers are changing and how they're transacted against the ledger. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that thought, and if you check with anybody, they'll tell you how painful that payment process is and what DigiBuild can do. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, just in that process, $1 billion contractors will spend about $300,000 per year just in collecting lien waivers alone. So now, since we can automate that whole thing using a trusted platform, now think about the other 150 different workflows that happen between these companies that we might be able to add more automation, more audit capability, more data integrity to. That's the potential of blockchain as a whole. Adam, how about you on the legal side? Any thoughts on, utilizing blockchain? Just another 30, 45 seconds, if you would.
Absolutely. I'll be very brief, Rob. A couple of things. The first point I want to just highlight is to complement what Josh was discussing on behalf of the carriers. I mean, I think it's a no-brainer that sureties, lenders, both for the beginnings of a project or anyone that's going to get involved, for a project that's already existing, the transparency, the insight, the data would be welcomed, I'm sure, by all of those industry players. The other point that I wanted to note with blockchain currently is procurement and scheduling. And both of those issues, they're separate, but for this example, they can be seen as related because the industry is still suffering, even though it's not spoken about as much as it was earlier in the year, from supply issues, labor issues. The home building industry in particular is still suffering tremendous delays coupled with and when you have those types of issues, you're dealing with business 101, customer service 101, and blockchain evolves that. Blockchain, I see almost forcing those types of discussions, the insight, the transparency that would come along with it, so that all are better informed throughout every stage of a project. And I think that's ultimately what we're hoping to achieve here.
Awesome. And yeah, that's a great point about blockchain. It's also this, ultimate collaborative tool. That automation we're talking about, it's not just for the general contractor. If we automate, just say a lien waiver as an example, the GC benefits and cost savings and risk savings, but so does the subcontractor who now doesn't have to engage in that workflow. So does the supplier. So this blockchain has been called coordination machines. And that's what construction and construction management is, one big coordination effort. So I'll leave everyone with this. First of all, thank you very much to all of our panelists. We know you're all very busy. You're all very successful in the industry. So we appreciate you all giving the time. To all of the viewers and people watching the panel right now, if you'd want to learn more about blockchain in construction, feel free to reach out to any of us. You could go to digibuild.com. We'd love to discuss with you. We're already working with 30 of the largest companies in construction, providing really powerful results. And, think about whatever current software you use right now. Think about what would happen if you could introduce more automation, if you could have audits happen with one click, if you could have data insights that allow you to make proper decisions in a way like other markets are able to do. That's what the potential of blockchain is. So we believe that in the future, entire construction projects will be delivered using blockchain. But in the interim, we've built out individual tools that can be utilized alongside a customer's existing stack that gives them a flavor or a preview of the powerful benefits of these blockchain-enabled workflows. So feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much to Shadow Ventures and the Shadow Summit for allowing us to be here. And again, thank you all to all of our panelists, Rob, Salvador, and the rest of our panel signing out. Thank you for listening to our talk on blockchain in construction. Thank you all.